Financial success is not a hard science. It's a soft skill, where how you behave is more important than what you know. Think about Ronald Read. He was a janitor and gas station attendant for 40 years. When he died in 2014, he left behind $8 million. He didn't win the lottery or inherit a fortune. He simply saved small amounts and let them compound for decades. Compare that to Richard Fuscone, a Harvard-educated MBA and high-flying executive who went bankrupt in the same year Ronald Read became a legend. Fuscone borrowed heavily and lived a life he couldn't sustain until the 2008 crash took everything. How did a janitor beat a finance genius? Because in finance, your ego is the gravity, and it can pull even the smartest people down. This is the central theme of The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. To build wealth, you don't need to be a genius. You just need to master your own nature. And the first step to mastering that nature is realizing that, when it comes to your financial choices, nobody is actually crazy.
It sounds strange, but your personal experience with money makes up maybe 0.00001% of what's happened in the world. Yet, it makes up 80% of how you think the world works. Your brain builds its understanding of money from the few years and events you personally lived through, then treats that tiny sample as if it were the full story of history. If you grew up when inflation was high, you see the stock market differently than someone who grew up during a 10-year bull market. One person remembers prices spiraling and security disappearing. Another remembers markets rewarding patience again and again. Those memories don't fade. They quietly become default beliefs about how money behaves. We aren't making choices based on a spreadsheet. We're making them based on the stories we've lived through. Numbers matter, but emotions, memories, and fear matter more. Your nervous system remembers losses, stress, and relief far more vividly than long-term averages. That's why two intelligent people can look at the same situation and reach opposite conclusions. This is why some people see risk where others see opportunity. What feels dangerous to one person feels obvious to another, not because one is smarter, but because their histories are different. The danger is assuming your personal experience is universal truth, when it's really just one path through a much larger world. In fact, much of what we call success is often driven by a force we hate to admit exists: luck. Luck and risk are siblings. They are both reminders that outcomes are shaped by forces beyond individual effort. Effort matters, but it operates inside timing, access, and randomness. Bill Gates was lucky to go to one of the only high schools with a computer in 1968. He worked hard, but he also had a 1 in a million start. Both things can be true at the same time. When we realize that luck plays a role, we become more humble in our success and more compassionate in our failures. And once you stop judging yourself by every gain or loss, you can focus on the one thing you can control: knowing when you have enough. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. In money, the goalpost is your definition of enough. You get a raise, and the new apartment becomes normal. Then the better car feels required. Modern life is built to push this along. Ads, feeds, and comparisons constantly suggest that everyone else is ahead. If your expectations rise faster than your income, the math guarantees frustration. You can earn more every year and still feel poor. That is the hamster on a gold-plated wheel. True wealth is what you do not see. It is the car not purchased, the watch left in the store, the upgrade you skipped. Those choices buy something invisible. Options. The option to quit a job, take a random Tuesday off, or change direction without panic. Wealth is control over your time, not proof displayed to strangers. That freedom is bought with compounding. Compounding is simple. Money earns returns, and those returns earn returns. Time is the multiplier. This is why Warren Buffett matters as an example. He is famous, but the real edge was starting early and staying invested. He began around age 10. If he had started at 30 and stopped at 60, no one would mention his name. About 95% of his wealth arrived after age 65. That sounds fake because our brains expect linear progress. Early compounding looks slow and boring. Later, it looks explosive. So we chase the big win instead of the long stretch of consistency. The real prize goes to the person who stays in the game the longest. Staying in the game means avoiding wipeouts, panic, and forced exits. High fixed costs, debt, and emotional decisions knock people out early. Patience, margin, and time keep the door open. The challenge is not making more money. It is deciding when you already have enough and letting compounding do the rest.
Staying in the game requires a shift in mindset, because getting wealthy and staying wealthy are two entirely different skills. That opening line is the foundation. It says the rules change once you have something to lose. Early on, progress comes from risk, optimism, and putting yourself out there. You accept volatility because upside matters more than stability. But keeping money requires the opposite. It requires humility and the fear that what you've made can be taken away just as fast. That fear is not panic, it is awareness. This is the survival mindset. Survival does not mean avoiding risk altogether. It means avoiding ruin. It means designing your decisions so that being wrong does not end the game. That matters because most success in any field, from art dealing to venture capital, is driven by tails. Tails are small, infrequent events that account for the majority of outcomes. Results are not evenly spread. A few moments do almost all the work. This is why you can be wrong half the time and still make a fortune if you own the tails. Accuracy is not the goal. Staying exposed is. Think of Disney. They struggled for years until Snow White changed everything. One outlier paid for all the quiet failures. Think of the S&P 500, where a handful of companies drive almost all the growth. Miss those few, and decades of effort barely show up. This leads to the core discipline. If you can simply survive the 99% of the time when nothing is happening or when things are going wrong, you give yourself the chance to be there for the 1% that changes your life. Most people fail during the dull stretches, not the dramatic ones. It's the extraordinary outliers that carry the weight of the world. And if you can survive the quiet years, you can reap the rewards of the loud ones.
But what are we actually working toward? The answer isn't a bigger house or a faster car. Most people say they want money, but that's not the real goal. Money is just a tool, and tools matter only because of what they give you back. The highest dividend money pays is freedom. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want. That sentence sounds simple, but it's everything. Control over your time, control over your choices, control over your life. This is the only form of wealth that consistently lines up with happiness. The problem is that we confuse wealth with being rich. Being rich is current income. It's the paycheck, the flashy car, the vacation photo, the post that gets likes. Wealth is different. Wealth is what you don't see. It's the money not spent. It's the quiet buffer between you and obligation. It's the engine of independence that stays under the hood while everyone stares at the paint. That confusion leads to something called the man in the car paradox. When you see someone driving a Ferrari, you don't think, wow, that guy is cool. You think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I was cool. The admiration never lands where you think it does. No one is as impressed with your possessions as you are. Other people are busy measuring themselves against your stuff, not admiring you for owning it. Your things become reference points for someone else's desire, not proof of your success. Real wealth isn't about the admiration of strangers, it's about the autonomy of your own life. It's waking up with options. It's saying no without panic. True wealth is the freedom you haven't spent yet.
Building financial freedom doesn't require clever tricks, complex spreadsheets, or bold gambles. It starts with one simple habit: saving. Not because you're saving for a house or a car, but because you're saving for a world that refuses to follow your plans. Life is unpredictable by default, and saving is how you prepare without needing to know what's coming next. Think of saving as the gap between your ego and your income. Income is what you earn.
Ego is what tempts you to spend it all to signal success, comfort, or status. When ego rises to match income, there's no room left to save. When you keep that gap open, you create flexibility. That flexibility is a hedge against surprises, mistakes, and bad timing. This leads to the idea of a margin of safety. You have to plan for the plan not going according to plan. That might mean an emergency fund, lower fixed expenses, or a more conservative investment mix. The point isn't optimization, it's survival. Room for error keeps you in the game long enough for compounding to matter. Without it, one bad break can undo years of progress. This is also why being perfectly rational isn't the goal. Being reasonable is. A rational person might stay fully invested during a market crash because the math says markets recover. A reasonable person knows they might panic, sell at the worst moment, and regret it for years. A plan that only works if you behave like a machine isn't a good plan. Build a plan that lets you sleep at night, even if it's not mathematically perfect. Because money isn't just numbers on a page. It's the calm that comes from knowing you can handle what life throws at you and still move forward on your own terms. That's the true psychology of money.